Right. So, welcome to World in a Frame, the show where we like to talk about movies. My name is Rasmus. I'm from Denmark.
Yeah, hi, I'm Thomas. I'm from Austria.
Uh, I'm Philip. I'm from Russia.
And I'm Rysia. I'm from London.
Great. And Rysia, you had you were the one who picked this movie, a little light-hearted comedy or something called the the Turin Horse by Bela Tarr. And I think you have to explain, why did you think this was the movie we had to watch?
Okay, so I thought that it would be interesting to, in the context of some other films that we've discussed, to have a look at the so-called slow cinema movement. I'm just putting it in quotes because I don't know what the directors that to which that label is assigned think about that label. But so Bela Tarr is generally included in that category. And then the Turin Horse, was his final film. And yeah, it's interesting to, I guess, to compare with some of his other films, which maybe cover similar themes. But interestingly, what I found with the Turin Horse was that I did not find it very slow at all. So, it is on the longer side, but I found it like to be very concise. Yeah, and well composed. If I just a couple more points actually as to what the kind of key thoughts that were going through my mind about this film. Just also sort of riffing off a little bit last week's discussion, where we were quite heavily focused on how do we interpret this film. And I just got a strong sense that there's no literal, you can't interpret this film very easily, or there are sort of multiple interpretations going on, and I just would personally, I found it I for this film at least, I favor sort of ambiguous interpretation. And the other thing that I wanted to try and show is to kind of work against the idea that this is a film about despair, because I didn't really think that, or at least it's too simple an interpretation. So just to describe the film really quickly. So the film takes place over the course of 7 days, and the setting is this sort of isolated rural, the sort of high altitude. There's like a single house where a father and his daughter live, fairly elderly father, and it seems we meet them on their return journey from going out to work or whatever on their horse and cart, and they're bringing the horse and cart back. And there's this incredible wind howling basically all the way through this film. And we witness over the course of the days of this film, that they sort of in a stepwise fashion, they're losing various elements of their survival, and then culminating in their loss of like will to go on, I would say. And then the other thing that none of this is really apparent at the outset, but as the film goes on, you're kind of realizing these things. And there are certain things that foreshadow their fate. So, the first thing that happens is that the horse doesn't want to go back out to work. And then there's like a beetle that has been, like a wood beetle that's been making a scratching noise for the past 50 years, and it stops making this noise. And the film opens with a monologue spoken over a black screen. That sort of, this monologue sets up the film in a sense. It kind of primes you to look at the film in a certain way, I think. And this is a retelling of the story, which apparently is, it's doubtful that it actually happened. The story of Nietzsche's encounter with a horse that was beaten to death by its owner in Turin. And shortly after that, it said Nietzsche himself goes mad. Just to say, I don't want to go on too long, but just to say one thing about, why I think the film isn't about despair, which, and I think the setting is really important in this film. And if anyone saw the making of documentary of this film, Bela Tarr said that the set, or I guess, this is kind of filmed in, it's not on it's sort of on on a location. The setting is has as much personality as the actors do, and I think that's important here because the wind really seems like a character in this film, or it's driving the events of the film. And yeah, so that for me, the isolated rural setting, I've read some review that in itself was something that was really depressing and despairing, but I would argue against that quite strongly. There's plenty of people that live, that kind of life, and importantly, don't seem to be struggling until this wind comes along, which is where we meet them. And I think the other reason why this isolated setting is important is because everything else is stripped away. So there's no politics. If we contrast it with, for example, the film Family Nest, which was Bela Tarr's first film, we're really sort of, up close and personal with his family's struggles with the system that they're living in, and also their interpersonal struggles. And, we have these kind of shots where their faces are filling the frames, and we just get intimately acquainted with all their neuroses and personal, conflicts and things like that. So I feel like it was important in this film to strip that away. So for me, that was really nice, and it illustrated that's kind of the kind of design of the film, that simplicity I really enjoyed. Okay, so maybe I'll just leave it there and see what others have to say, and we can have an actual conversation rather than me monologuing.
I guess it's the first film that we discussed that was also directed by a woman, because it has two directors, Bela Tarr and his wife Agnes Chranicki. So I guess it's the first film directed by a woman that we discuss in this channel. Before watching A Turin Horse, I tried watching The Man from London, his previous film. And I was really, depressed by this film. I didn't finish it. This film was much less depressing, I guess, surprisingly for me. For some reason, there's something comforting about this life in a country house. Although it's very simple and, you understand that it's the characters undergoing death, but this monotonity of life is very comforting, at least watching it. I don't know about living it. I don't think it is as comforting, or maybe it is, I don't know. But watching it for 2 hours and 40 minutes is interesting. And it's a very good movie from aesthetic point of view, I guess. Slow cinema, etc. But the themes that this film deals with is basically the Nietzschean philosophy. I don't know much about it, but yes, it starts with this narration about this accident, and this Nietzsche basically has a mental breakdown in Turin, and like for 11 years he's basically very seriously psychologically ill, because he sees this violence. And I think, based on my understanding of Nietzschean philosophy, what caused this mental breakdown is this understanding of what was going to happen in 20th century. And largely, I guess, Nietzsche was right, because the ideas that philosophy that he proclaimed was very violent and anti-human, I guess. And it, here we have basically a take on Bela Tarr take on basically reverse of 7 days of world creation. We see 6 days of world destruction. One thing I didn't like is this. It's full of. It's not full, but there are a lot of blasphemous ideas. For example, that what God creates is always ghastly, and it's a quote. And I disagree with it, but I understand that as Tarr is Maoist, and apparently, according to Wikipedia, he when he was in high school, instead of a backpack, he had Mao's Bible in his pocket, and it's apparently he hasn't changed. The very few words spoken, but there is this key, I guess, scene when a person from village comes to this house of the peasants to fetch some brandy there, to ask for brandy. And he tells that that what is going on is the basically the slow death of the world, the apocalypse, I guess, and that happens because of the ideology of acquired the base acquire, and great, excellent nobles had to understand there is no God, but didn't. When they finally understood that, and that there's neither good nor bad, they also understood they didn't exist, hence they lost. It's basically, I guess, a take of Laszlo Krasnohorkai and Bela Tarr and Agnes Hranitsky and all these filmmakers on the, I guess, on the world, their philosophy, their take on Nietzschean philosophy, in a sense, and it basically sums up what they think. And this 2 hours and 40 minutes is just an extended explanation of this concept, and that's, I think it's an important film to understand that what Bela Tarr began with this exploration of social stuff that I didn't watch and probably won't, because it doesn't really matter what he made early, because what he came to after all this exploration of politics, society, filmmaking is, made succinctly clear in this Turin Horse, and in a sense it is masterpiece. It's also his last film. Apparently Bela Tarr didn't have a mental breakdown like Nietzsche, but he tried to organize some kind of film schools, etc. But it's his last film, and I think there's a certain genre, I guess, of last films. And when we talk about the movies I recommend, I will talk about it more. And Thomas, what do you think about Turin Horse?
Well, I have to say, I mean, I watched this film a while back. It was actually being screened at the local cinema, and I had the day free, basically. So I watched it, and it was the first Bela Tarr film I watched. And I was left kind of disappointed, because in a sense it was like almost a parody version of what I thought a Bela Tarr film would be like. Really extremely self-serious, very slow. We have like 10-minute long shots of an old guy eating a potato and whatnot. And I'm really not an opponent of slow cinema whatsoever. I think it can be done very effectively. For example, a film that I really love, Shandil Man, I also watched it in cinemas, where we watched basically 3 hours of nothing happening, also with a lot of potatoes. That's why I'm making the connection. And that film, I think, is fantastic. The Turin Horse, for me, didn't really work. And it's funny, because when I heard you describe it, and also when you read like a Wikipedia summary or whatever, and look at a couple of still photographs from the film, the picture that the ideas and those still images create, to me, is way more impactful than actually watching the film. So I do think it kind of fails, at least for me, to really express its ideas in a compelling way. That being said, I still think the ideas and this central concept of this small family slowly losing the little bit that they have left, is a very interesting concept. I'm not sure if the film does that much with it. Another thing I wanted to talk about, Philip, because you mentioned that you think, or maybe correct me if I misunderstood you, that you said Nietzsche's philosophy is kind of like anti-human or whatever. I don't think that at all. I actually think Nietzsche is a very positive philosopher, because many people kind of misunderstand him as a nihilist or a nihilistic philosopher or whatever, but his whole project was saving the world from nihilism. What he did, everyone knows the famous quote, "God is dead and we have killed him," and so on, but it's not like a celebration or whatever. It's simply recognizing that after the Enlightenment, the cornerstone that was religion in society is fading away, and if the people don't get something else that they can hold on to, that will lead to the death of society or whatever, maybe in a dramatic sense. I'm also not at all an expert on Nietzsche, so anyone in the comments or in the call, please correct me. But yeah, his whole idea, and he has this beautiful phrase in German, it's Umwertung aller Werte. I guess you could translate it to something like a re-evaluation of all the values. So like a complete reinterpretation of what makes my life meaningful and so on in a secular world. And I think that is a very positive and pro-human project he undertook. And he also has always this very poetic language, dancing on the ropes and so on, while you're balancing over the abyss or something like that. So yeah, I do think Nietzsche is a pretty positive philosopher. This film, however, yeah, I don't know, it didn't really evoke that many emotions for me. I really was kind of annoyed with how I don't know, maybe this sounds too mean, but to me the film felt kind of up its own ass at times, like so confident that this is a great masterpiece and so on, but doesn't have that much to show for it, in my opinion anyways. And one more thing before I also stop my rambling monologue, because this beginning monologue that we already talked about, where they tell the story of Nietzsche and so on, I think it's very funny because so the narrator basically says, Nietzsche saw how this horse was being beaten by his owner, and he ran up to the horse and he hugged it and embraced it and so on, and broke down crying. And then no one, so Nietzsche went on to become mentally ill and whatever, and died 10 years later. But then the film says no one knows what happened to the horse. And that, I think, is a very interesting sentence, because we're then, on a visual level, led to believe that we are following the story of the horse, while at the same time being told that like the story of the horse is completely unknown. And I interpreted that in the way that we're not following the literal horse that Nietzsche hugged, but this whole idea of why Nietzsche hugged this horse, because he saw this creature in pain and it really broke his heart, and he had to try to comfort it and so on. And that concept of this really deep empathy being translated to every creature in pain everywhere. For example, this family and this horse, even if it's not the literal horse that Nietzsche hugged, but it's in a similar position, and humans as well, and maybe you could expand it to the whole world or whatever. I would like to know what you think about that.
First of all, I must say, I don't think this is slow cinema. Come on, 6 days, and it's compressed down to 2.5 hours. This is heck. I guess this. First of all, Bela Tarr was supposed to have been in Copenhagen this January and presenting his movies at the cinema, and also giving some lectures to some film students. And sadly, he passed away 3 weeks before that. So that was a shame. I would really have loved to go and watch this movie with him presenting them, but they still showed them, and I watched Satan Tango for the second time in the cinema. But I must admit that I didn't get to watch any of his other movies. I have previously watched Werkmeister Harmonies and also the Turin Horse in the cinema. And for this time, so I watched the Turin Horse at home on my own screen, and I think that my experience watching this was a little different than the first time I watched it at cinema. I really think that this movie is supposed to be watched in a proper cinema. The atmosphere, the sound, and so on. It really it had a great effect on me when I watched it the first time, and I must admit the effect was probably not that big this time, and I think it's basically due to the experience just watching on a smaller screen and so on. I think that the Turin Horse, compared to the two other movies, is very different. It's very dense. Also, I think especially Satan Tango is. I think it's fun and lighthearted, and I think it's much easier watching that than watching the Turin Horse. I think for me, this is. I think it's right that Nietzsche plays a role in this when trying to understand it. I would also like if we could talk a little about this guy, the first guy that comes. Philip mentioned him too, and I have for several times tried to read Nietzsche's Also sprach Zarathustra, and I have never finished it. But I think the basic thing is that this character goes up to the mountain, thinks all the right things, goes down to the people, expressing them, and they just think, "Oh, you're just an idiot. Go away." And it's sort of the same reaction that we see here, that this guy comes from town, says, "Look, the world is ending, everything is falling apart," and the only thing they say is just, "Oh, rubbish, go away." And that for me reminded me sort of Nietzsche's book here. But I don't know. I actually like also the Turin Horse, even though I much prefer Satan Tango. But I guess I'm more nihilistic than Nietzsche when it comes to the matters of the world. And I also would like if we could talk about sort of the later the sort of society and history, especially around Hungary, and how that might have affected this movie.
Yeah.
Of course, Bela Tarr grew up in Hungary, but and it was for a long time a communist country. But apparently, since I guess the communist government in 1980s or 1970s was quite dysfunctional, judging on what Soviet government, the Soviet Union was, and Soviet Union was the leader of Warsaw Pact. But I mean, Bela Tarr was a Maoist in his heart, so I don't think he has a big problem with communism. And afterwards, maybe he has some problem with nationalism. And yeah, I understand that Viktor Orban, the current president of Hungary for a long time, and I think I may be wrong, but Orban was the president of Hungary for when the film was made. He is a nationalist, so maybe it's a response to that. And Nietzsche was kind of writing on nationalism, probably was against it. And Bela Tarr was also against nationalism. So maybe it's a take on nationalism. But I think it's also much deeper. I mean,
At the end of the Cold War, before the fall of Stalinism, we had Francis Fukuyama writing his famous book, the End of History, or something like that, where he sort of talked about that now history no longer evolves. We have sort of gotten into this state where the things have stabilized and so on. And a couple of years later, then we have the fall of Stalinism in Eastern Europe. And I guess if when I watch Bela Tarr and something like Satan Tango, I can only think about that these are the prophets that come and say, now the world is going to be better. It's the old regime has collapsed, and here is the bright future. But it never came, and that's sort of what I think about. Many people in Hungary must have felt that they had the old regime, and then it fell away, and now now it's Viktor Orban, and it's still a repressive society and regime, just with another. It's just another form of I can't pronounce that. Hard leadership. Their government, and I guess it's sort of something like that, maybe.
Mm. I thought that I was thinking I got this sense strongly when reading and watching Satan Tango that this was about a sort of criticism of institutions, or I would say bureaucratic powers, where there's the basic story of this film is that there's a community where there's the mill that provides them all with work and is the structure of their society, and then the mill is taken away, and people basically don't know what to do. So it's about how people act when that kind of structure is removed, and it's all through the film, and the book, the images of there's a lot of just people living in filth, or I can't think of the word. Grotesque, the depiction of the grotesque, and that film for me, that starts with this despair scenario, and then the guy that they thought was dead, Irimiash, comes back, and then they're not they have this naivety that means that they put all their faith in him, and then they kind of just end up in another system that's similar to the one that they were in. They don't achieve any sort of freedom at all. And there's a big monologue speech in that film as well, with the bureaucrat guy that's giving Irimiash his orders. He's got this big sort of, this is what my philosophy is. He's talking about the importance of order and things like that. And so I was thinking about that speech when I was trying to understand the speech that's in the Turin Horse, where it sort of seems like that speech is much more from the director's voice, and also from Laszlo Krasznahorkai's voice, in terms of their understanding of the world, and their description of, basically, there's no no truly noble beings suffer, basically, and that you cannot have nobility and victory in kind of, in the world, and that this repeats itself over and over again. And then there's also the kind of ideas of order opposed with chaos in the Turin Horse as well, where there's a scene where there's some Romany people on their horse and carts come and take water from the well, and they are, they're not affected by any of the apocalyptic stuff that's going on. And I guess that's some part of that, what the film is trying to tell us as well.
I largely agree with you, Rasmus, that yes, it can be read as, this, I guess, response to Fukuyama, that his, prophecies failed. And I think it's kind of this Satatango and this story of, Eremias, who becomes this new leader, but he is very similar to the ones before, is also related to this concept that Fukuyama's prophecies will fail to materialize, I guess. That's an interesting take, I guess.
But I don't think that this movie exclusively should be interpreted as some sort of historic allegory or something. I think there are many ways to interpret it. I could even argue that it literally is the end of the world that that we are watching, and so I have many takes on it. And maybe especially, I would also like to talk about this. When I watch this movie, I'm astounded once again that this movie is from 2011. When I watch it, it feels like a much older movie, and that I think probably is true for all of Bela Tarr's movies, that they feel like something that are from another era or something.
So yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of it has to do with, of course, it being black and white and also filmed on physical film, I would assume. But also, yeah, the way he does the set design and the location and the characters and so on. I definitely agree that I was also surprised when I first saw that this is like a 2010 era film. That's yeah, kind of crazy. But please go ahead.
When I watched the making of documentary, which didn't, I mentioned it twice now, but it didn't really tell me a great deal, except sorry, I hope I don't go off on a tangent, but he used a lot of, he obviously had wind machines for this film, and he also had a helicopter to generate loads of dust and wind. So I thought that was pretty cool. And there's also a good wind machine scene in Saturn Tango where they're sort of, I love that scene. It's like they're being pulled down this street, and it's sort of nice perspective as well. What was I going to say? I can't remember what I was going to say. Something about this setting, this kind of isolated setting where, I mean, if you go to like I don't know where I've been to, like rural Italy, like in the mountains or in the Balkans, that's a good example, where people do live this way with like a horse and cart still to this day. So but the film is sort of outside of time in that sense, where you don't know, is this today or is it 100 years ago? It's really hard to tell. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say on that point.
Did you notice that when each day they eat these potatoes, and how the camera shifts. The first time we watched the father, watching him. Day 2, we watched the daughter. Day 3, we have them sitting opposite each other. Day 4, they sit opposite each other again, but this time reversed. And the sort of and when I noticed it, I tried to sort of think, why is this? There must be some sort of function or meaning. Just like they are constantly sitting, watching out of the window, and there are some interpretations that are pretty easy. You can
Well, they take
looking.
turns because there's only one window, so they have to. One person can sit.
But this eating the potatoes, how did you interpret that?
I mean, potatoes are like the staple food of the people, I guess, in this region. It's very basic, very easy to cook, and that's like, I guess it's the symbol of this peasant lifestyle. And I don't know. I think it, exemplifies the simplicity. Yes, I guess that's one way to interpret it. I don't know what to say about this. Like the first day we see the man, the second the daughter. Although it's a very interesting thing that you noticed, I didn't, and I don't know. Like, probably. I mean, Bela Tarr and Vlasta Krasnohorkaya, who wrote the screenplay, and also Agnes Hranitsky, they had some basic ideas about geometry or something, probably, when they wrote the script and made the movie. That's, I guess. I don't know. I guess I have a question for Thomas. What do you mean by substance that you want in the film? Because it's very hard to like we have talked about a lot of stuff, that a lot of ways that we can interpret the film. Because as I understand, substance is, ability to talk about the film and like deeper themes that are in this film. But maybe you mean something else by substance. So
Oh, I mean, I agree broadly with that definition, I guess. I also wouldn't say that this is like a substanceless film or whatever. Definitely not. I just think, I mean, it's a very thin line, right, between being like very rich with theme and subtext, and that's why you can interpret it in a million different ways, or having just one really broad, like, surface level theme, and that's why you can interpret it in many different ways, because the film isn't actually saying anything specific. And yeah, I don't know where Turin Horse falls on that side, to be honest. At least when I first watched it, I definitely thought that it was more like yeah, kind of pretending to be more than it actually is. Yeah, but I don't know, the longer I think about it, maybe there is more to it. It's certainly a complex film in that sense, because you have to kind of evaluate this, how long is it, like 2.5 hour long film, in so many different interpretative ways that, of course, completely change how one scene interacts with another and so on. So I think it's really difficult to make a conclusion about how, I guess, deep or rich or whatever the film actually is. Yeah, I don't know. I would have to think about it for way longer than we have time.
I think that you are right, that if you don't get this emotional connection to it, it can be sort of tedious to watch. I think that for me, it hit me the first time I watched it in cinema. It hit me on an emotional level more than an intellectual level. That when I got out of the cinema, I felt like I had been bombarded or sort of been through a very, very hard experience, and in that sense, I felt that it had something, it had affected me in some way. But if it doesn't hit you emotionally, I also think that there's not that much intellectually to digest.
No, I think you raise a very good point that I didn't even mention, but this distinction between the intellectual and the emotional level, of course, very important. Yeah, that was really my experience with the film, that it left me pretty cold, and that way I was kind of more annoyed by all the stuff than really entranced or whatever. Yeah, it's funny because what you described, for example, is what happened when I watched at the same cinema where I watched Turin Horse. I watched Tarkovsky's Mirror, which is also a very slow film that I have no idea what this is about. But that film really left me with this heavy, empty feeling, like yeah, I don't know, outside of space and time and whatever. So I definitely understand that your point of view, but yeah, I can only talk from my experience, of course. And even if it was like the most brilliant intellectual piece of art ever, I would never read a book by Einstein, for example, and not call it brilliant, but at the same time I would not have like an emotional response probably to it. And it's also a matter of question, of course, what you want to get out of your art.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to get an emotional response from Einstein. Maybe if you are a physics geek, but otherwise.
No, what I was just trying to say was like that, yeah, this purely intellectualized work can be genius in that way while still not connecting on a personal level. That was kind of my point, that like even
Yeah.
if Turin Horse was like the most deep, sophisticated film ever made, it would still not change the experience that I had with it.
Yeah, I understand your point of view of this, difference between emotional and intellectual. I guess emotionally, I didn't really like connect with it like that particularly. It didn't, affect me, luckily, because if it had affected me, I would probably be depressed by it and think about it for another day in a depressed mood. I don't want that. So maybe that's.
I would have loved that, for me to be depressed for a day because of this film. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, and that's what happened to me. I was very depressed. It's very good.
I watched it twice, and yeah, I just realized from something you were saying, Thomas, where the scenes being so repetitive but slightly, as the events in the background are going on, you're comparing one scene with the previous event of that scene, and I feel like that's where the poignant, because where does that sense of poignancy come from? It's those repetitive acts meaning something different in the changing background. But yeah, I mean, the first time I watched it, I didn't have any strong emotional response or anything. And I think I was just sort of really preoccupied with the horse in the film, and I didn't really figure out what was going on until quite late. And then I was like, oh no, they're gonna perish. And I was and I also noticed this thing about myself, which I found kind of gross, which was I found myself instantly, just loving this horse, and it's so cute, and the story of the horse, and then you're kind of confronted with this horse that doesn't want to eat, and it doesn't want to move or do work. And, my heart was instantly breaking for this horse. But it took way longer for the humans. I was just like, why are you eating the potato like that? And, I was really preoccupied with the wind as well, the way it's on a really small loop, the audio of the wind. And it took me a while to get into the film. But then the second time I watched it, I was deeply affected. But also I didn't come away depressed, because I felt a really strong admiration for the will of these people. All of these things were going wrong, and they were just like basically trying to overcome these things with whatever was left with them. So that was my main sense in this film. Obviously, it was depressing as an ending, but yeah, I guess that's what I focused on. But also just just kind of amazed at myself that it took me so long to sympathize with them. Yeah, compared to the animal, which yeah.
But they tried to escape and they failed.
Oh yeah.
And that for me, I don't know. I had a different interpretation. I don't think that they are fighting. For me, it's I'm watching someone who just knows this is going down the drain. In a while, it's over, and then the light goes out, and but that's just my interpretation. I don't see much hope in this movie, and that's maybe one of the things I like about it. I just have to talk about at least one more aspect of the Turin Horse, because one of the things that really also had an effect on me was the music. I guess the music is one of the big aspects of setting this atmosphere, and probably I think that's also, when watching it in a proper cinema, was what sort of got to me, because when I watched at the small screen, I could feel that it was not the same intensity that I got. And it's the music is as you may know, made by the guy who played Ermias in Satan Tango, and he has made music to many of his of Bela Tarr's movies. So did you have anything to say about that aspect, the music?
Yeah, I get what the concept of the music was. I think it was intended to be overbearing, obviously very sort of rhythmic, and there's a slight sort of discordance about it as well. But and it's perfect for the film. But I wouldn't sit down and listen to it. I didn't really like it as a piece of music. And the music, I think I assume he also wrote the music in Satan Tango, which is pretty melodic. Again, it's a very short piece of music that's just repeated in different parts of the film. It's just a gorgeous piece of music. And I think I've actually listened to a fair amount of his music. He's a fairly famous musician on the Hungarian music scene, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But and he's a poet as well. I guess I just felt that his strengths maybe I'm not a proficient enough to be a music critic, but I think his strengths lie in the sort of more traditional instruments and yeah. So I was a bit underwhelmed, but I also understand that it fit perfectly with this film, I think.
As I promised to talk later about the so-called mini genre of the last film, I guess I can recommend the last film by Tarkovsky, The Sacrifice. It's kind of Tarkovsky last message to the world, at least in a Semitic sense. And Me Too by Alexei Balabanov. It's Alexei Balabанов's last message to the world, at least also in the cinematic sense. And I hope Lars von Trier makes the film after that he's working on, and it will be another addition to the to this mini genre. I wish him long life, but I want him to make his last movie, and yeah, I guess that's my recommendations.
Yeah. I don't think Lars von Trier will make any more movies. He's at a nursing home.
But anyway, the house that Jack built can also be a last movie, I guess, in this genre, because it kind of the name of the film refers to the this nursery rhyme that was used in his first film.
I mean, I guess I would definitely agree with you that The Sacrifice or also other Tarkovsky movies, even more maybe The Mirror, which I already mentioned, are really great. In my opinion, the way better example of like slow cinema, if you can even call it that. I think Tarkovsky is always brilliant. Maybe a bit more strange recommendation that came to mind, only because, I mean, okay, maybe this is really stupid, but it kind of reminded me of the film Onibaba by Kaneto Shindo, which is a Japanese demon horror film, but it's also about this kind of peasant life and how these two women deal with their poverty and the oppression from the outside, which also leads them to then become oppressors and so on. It's really a brilliant film. I don't know if it fits that well with the Turin Horse, but I still recommend it anyways.
Rysia, any recommendations?
I would just hesitate because I don't know what to recommend. Well, that's not so unusual for me, but like I got quite frustrated with Saturn Tango, so I don't understand why it was 8 hours long. It took me 8 hours to read the book, and the book is so rich. And I was watching the film thinking, would I understand this film if I hadn't read the book? And I'm not sure. But yeah, so go and read Saturn Tango. That's my technically just watching words. So yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah. I guess that, well, of course, same year as the Turin Horse here, Melancholia, of course, came out also. The End of the World, speaking of Lars von Trier. And another thing this sort of reminded me about, and I know, Thomas, you have watched this because I have looked at your Letterboxd. The cartoon When the Wind Blows, with these two elderly people living in a house, and then the nuclear bomb sets off and they are slowly dying. And it's an awful awful movie to watch, but awful in the good sense. And it's depressing in a good way. And it reminded me of that. And then for some reason, I'm constantly thinking about Bergman when watching Bela Tarr, and it's sort of the close-ups and some of the shots, but for some reason I couldn't. There isn't just one movie that this is the one. So something like maybe Shame or The Silence or something that has sort of a similar vibe, but then again, it's not really the same. But well, anything Bergman, I will always recommend. Yeah.
Wild Strawberries, maybe.
It's much too lighthearted. Much too lighthearted.
Yeah, maybe.
I guess that this was it for now then. So thank you for listening, and go watch the Turin Horse and other Bela Tarr movies, and then bye for now.
Bye.
I
Bye.
Great.